Lucas Owen, thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
Chris, I'm doing well. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Mate, it's a pleasure. We finally got here. We've been trying for the last few weeks. But mate, it's good to finally be sitting down and having this chat. Mate, do you want to give a very quick rundown as to what you do, your line of work? Just a little bit of a background on your business as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm a qualified naturopath, and really my journey started out actually playing professional soccer. I was really interested in how I could basically improve my performance on the soccer field. I was always experimenting different protocols, different supplements, and then I just sort of fell in love with the whole idea that we can fully take control of our physiology and our biology. And that's when I started going down a rabbit hole and fell in love with this whole idea of biohacking, which essentially just means that you're leveraging tools within your environment to basically improve your physiological or psychological performance. And then from there, I basically started my Instagram page where, my goal and my mission is to deliver underground health information that people will struggle to find on Google. Um, and then basically from there, just branched out to YouTube, podcast, got my own website, got a few courses for people. And yeah, I just really love what I do. My mission is to, showcase extremely underground health information.
Yeah, but you have a very important role in that a lot of the information, I keep up to date with your page and what you post, and it's very valuable. It's incredibly valuable. And a lot of people, only the other day I thought of this, is that a lot of people search but don't research. There's a big difference between searching and researching, right? And the space that you work in is, when you say biohacking, what you're referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, is just utilizing what we have at our disposable, the same things that we've had for thousands of years. You're just utilizing those and putting them back into your overall, could be diet or whatever it may be, supplement plan. And a lot of those things people don't know about because they're used to buying things with a box from a chemist with a sticker on it, your name on it, and that's what they run off with. And you know, obviously there's a few websites that people would know of, the bigger ones, for finding this information out, but it's not enough.
Mm.
Not enough people are aware of what you can actually do to maximize. It's not cheating. It's not taking shortcuts. It's utilizing what's there for us to have. It's there for us. And I
Yeah.
feel like over time we've drifted away from that.
Yeah. No,
It's pretty fair.
you're spot on, Chris. I think like that whole premise, that term biohacking is really just like we're just trying to mimic as much as what we used to have 100 years ago. We used to be outside in nature, exposed to sunlight, not slopping sunscreen on our skin. We're not using like these deodorants that have chemicals that can decrease testosterone in men. Yeah, the whole premise around biohacking is basically just trying to maximize our metabolic health, and so that we can just feel and perform our best, basically.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? It's funny. I'm doing this today because last night I watched a documentary called Fed Up. Have you seen that?
No, I think I've heard of it though.
It's about the sugar industry.
Oh yeah.
Man, I'll tell you what, I'm blown away. Still, I can't believe it. I can't believe what I witnessed in that. I'm thinking, it's essentially poison. Like, I don't know how else you would describe it. It's poison. Like the damage it does to our bodies is, it's poison. And it's like what the tobacco industry was 50,
Mm.
60 years ago, where there was no public awareness as to exactly what these things are doing to your body. I feel like the sugar industry, the food industry, but especially the sugar industry, are what the tobacco industry used to be. And I'll tell you what, when you watch that, there was examples of CEOs of soft drink companies in court suggesting that there's no evidence to suggest that soft drinks are bad for us. I'm like, whoa. And it's been accepted in certain ways. And just, you see the way the game's played. I mean, the government would be pushed to take action against them, and then they would decide to come to the party. Let's use Coca-Cola for an example. They were one case, And instead of reformulating their product, being Coca-Cola, to have reduced sugar or whatever it may be, they've just gone, you know what, we'll create a different product, Coke Zero. Therefore, they've got an option of having the full sugar version or the no sugar version. And what people don't realize is that the synthetic sugars are still, they're still sugar in a sense. It's the same thing, just a different name. And when you watch that, I mean, I was just, the amount of different names, that's what got me. The amount of different names on products and whatever we're consuming. There's dextrose, there's all these different things that are sugar, but they've got a different name. The biggest one was the corn syrup.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, I was completely blown away by what I saw.
Well, it shocks me to see how they can try and justify the fact that they're actually safe for human consumption. Because if we look at the initial like rat studies, what they do is they overfeed rats with, let's say, high fructose corn syrup, or like they'll give them to these rats for maybe a week or two, and some of the changes that they notice are like fatty liver disease, the beginning of type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, body-wide inflammation. Like, I think these companies are, it shocks me to think that they can, push products that are supposedly safe, when really they, can do a lot more harm than good. And in fact, this is why we need to go back to the origins, which is like, if we're going to be consuming something sweet, consume fruit. Fruit has the polyphenols, the flavonoids, the fiber, the things in there that actually offset a lot of the damaging effects that all of these concentrated artificial sugars can cause.
Well, fiber is sort of the balance to that, isn't it? So, because we all know fruit's got sugar in it, right? But the fiber in the fruit sort of balances that out. It negates a lot of the negative effects of sugar, because sugar in itself is negative. There's nothing positive about it. But when it's combined with the fiber in fruit, it changes the way we would digest it, compared to having a glass of Coke, which has no fiber, and your body's just getting your poor liver, like what it's trying to do. And then what it does, release insulin. Insulin stores that as body fat deposits. And with that documentary I was saying, they spoke about a study on there that was conducted with, there was 43 mice, cocaine addicted mice, 43. And they started giving them sugar water for, I think it was like 14 days or something. And at the end of it, they gave the choice to the rat, cocaine or the sugar water. 40 out of 43 went for the sugar water. That's how addictive it is.
It's unreal. Yeah, I think that the addictive nature of sugar, combined with the ease of accessibility nowadays, like the fact that it's pretty much ubiquitous, and so like it's also disguised under like you said, different names that they can sort of hide sugar underneath as well.
And what they did, they went on a war against the fat industry. This was decades ago. So the sugar industry and the fat industry were going head to head with what's actually dangerous. And what they started doing, they put all the blame on fat. So then what companies would do, they went through the fat-free, remember the fat-free, we still say it now, but now it's shifted to sugar-free or zero sugar or reduced sugar, right? But it was fat-free, 95% fat-free. And what they would do, they would take all the fat out and they would then pump it with sugar, right? Or sweeteners, because when you take a fat out of a product, obviously it's disgusting. So they started pumping them with sugar. Man, I'll tell you what, it's a dirty game. It really is. And what really got me was the children, is the marketing. And I've said, mate, if you go through my post from 12 months ago, you'll see my post regarding, I've been opposed to fast food advertising now for a long time. I just don't see how it can be illegal for tobacco companies to advertise cigarettes, but yet it's okay for Maccas not only to advertise, but to advertise and target children in that advertising. It's criminal.
Yeah, and I think the other really bad side of that is also like the fact that, children are young and that they're just developing habits and things like that. And then, downstream, like these are the critical ages where they need to actually be building these good habits. But if they're, bombarded with, you know, some of these marketing campaigns, things like that, it can really lead them down to a path where, once they hit 18, 19, they're already obese, they're already experiencing depression, hormonal issues. So I definitely think something needs to change.
What's the obesity rate in Australia at the moment? I know it's bad. It's like, was it like 2 out of 3 are overweight or obese or something incredible?
Close to, I'm pretty sure it's like on par with the US now.
So we've got a serious problem, massive problem. And I think this is
Mm.
only the beginning of it.
Yep.
I think in 30 or 40 years from now, we're going to have a crisis. And the amount of money, look, it's already happening, but the amount of money that it's going to take to treat obesity related illnesses, it's going to be phenomenal.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's going to be a big emphasis on like anti-obesity drugs. In fact, there's one that's been out for quite some time now that's approved for fat loss or for dropping body fat. It's a once a week injection called Ozempic. That's sold out. Like it's already sold out. Like
How would that work?
Ozempic is one of those drugs. It's called a GLP-1 agonist, and so what it does is actually um, makes the body feel full, and it tricks the stomach and the brain into thinking that it's like full, and basically makes people just repel food. Um, yeah.
Is that, I'm familiar with something very similar. It's been used in bodybuilding circles for years. Is that what it is?
Oh, lots of bodybuilders use it, but they also use another drug called metformin.
Yes, the diabetic.
Yeah, that's the other one that a lot of bodybuilders use. That one there, in my opinion, like given that I'm obviously a naturopath,
Mm.
my dad's a pharmacist, so I'm sort of torn in between. I still think like some medicines absolutely are highly beneficial. For example, metformin, we actually know that it can extend lifespan.
Mm.
And so like, yeah, personally, I'm someone who actually will sometimes incorporate it, even though I don't have diabetes. Sometimes I will incorporate it if I'm having like a massive cheat meal, or like it's Easter time, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the feeling. But you know what? I remember my dad's doctor years ago when I went to the doctors with my dad and was sitting there and my dad asked him about metformin. And my dad's not a diabetic or anything, but he heard a lot of things about it. And I remember my dad's doctor saying that if he could, he would give it to every single person.
Mhm. Yep.
So must be obviously some benefit. I mean, is it, because I understand that it's given to pre-diabetics.
Yep.
How does that work in regards to the
Yeah.
insulin
So
and
metformin's really interesting because it works through a variety of pathways. Number one is that it stops glucose release from the liver, because the liver can also actually create glucose through a process known as gluconeogenesis. But then also metformin can actually upregulate the enzymes that suck up sugar from the bloodstream into the muscle, the GLUT4 receptors. And so by doing this, it can basically help to lower blood sugar levels, and increase muscle glycogen stores. Um, but that's not to say it still has a range of side effects. Number one is that it can decrease vitamin B12 levels. So anyone that takes metformin needs to make sure they're supplementing with vitamin B12. Um, and also, it can affect testosterone levels in men. It can increase sex hormone binding globulin, which can decrease um, free testosterone levels. And then also for some people, when they first start taking metformin, it can cause like crazy GI related side effects, diarrhea, and some other microbiome abnormalities.
so it's definitely not harmless.
Definitely not.
No, nothing is really, is it? As soon as there's always an effect to everything you take. But we'll stay on that topic about testosterone because something I really wanted to speak to you about. we're in an epidemic of low testosterone. To my understanding, I'm sure you can elaborate more on that. But
Mm.
what are you seeing now in 2022 compared to 50 years ago in terms of testosterone level, the average testosterone levels in men?
Yeah, well, the way I like to look at it, unfortunately for guys nowadays, is unfortunately they're not the man their grandfather was. Um, and if we look at the stats, I mean, there's, like you said, there is literally a global decline in testosterone production in men. And to add to that, um, Jay Campbell, who wrote the book TRT Decoded, he basically mentioned that in 33 years from now, all men in the Western world will be infertile. So their
Wow.
sperm production will finally hit zero or minimal, or and so they'll become infertile. So this is like a dramatic impact that low testosterone can have.
Yeah, low testosterone is terrible. I'm very open about this. So when I was 19, 20, I used steroids
Mm.
purely just because I wanted to. I was going to the gym and I wasn't getting big enough, fast enough. Um, and I remember at the time, and it was nothing full on. It was just like, I think it was like sus 250 or something of that nature I was on, but bigger amounts of like 3 meals a week, like huge amounts. And I remember how I felt at the time. You feel like Superman, like literally you feel like Superman, right? And then but I remember I had no education. I was badly informed and 19. So my body's still developing and doing what it does. So a big regret of mine, probably one of the biggest regrets I've got, was doing that. It was 10 years ago now. But I remember when I finished, I just stopped it, just stopped like 3 or 4 months and then just stopped. And I remember the feeling immediately following that. It was like hell. It was bad. I'm talking dramatic muscle loss, dramatic mood swings, like emotional, um, no energy, period, no energy. I could get up and I'm ready to go back to bed in an hour. No energy, flat, brain fog constantly, no sex drive. Like it was terrible.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's obviously what it's like to have low testosterone. Because obviously when you start using testosterone, including TRT, obviously, your body stops producing it. And then when you come off it, it should, depending on the individual, at some point fire back up again and start producing it naturally. But that period of time can sometimes be months. So you're
Mm.
essentially running with no testosterone. And let me tell you now, it's absolutely terrible. If I had the choice of being like that or dying, I'd choose death every day of the week. Is horrible.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's it is unfortunate that there's also like a lot of young men, like in the maybe 19 to 25, that are suffering from low testosterone. And what happens is they'll go to their doctor, they'll start describing their symptoms, and usually what the doctor, I mean, the typical approach would be to then prescribe them an antidepressant.
Mm,
And so like by prescribing an antidepressant medication, without having a look at the underlying potential cause, if they just bothered to do a blood test to assess testosterone levels, this young man has now, instead of targeting the root cause, potentially going on a medication that will lead to sexual dysfunction even after stopping the medication, um, and also is associated with weight gain, because serotonin reuptake inhibitors can increase fat gain, slow down metabolism. I think what hopefully this message gets out there. I know you've got a great reach on your podcast. Um, for the young men out there, if they do suspect that they have like low testosterone symptoms, please go and get your levels checked, and and work on that, because as you mentioned, Chris, like it's terrible. Like for
mm.
guys having low tests, like it's devastating.
Mate, it is. It ruins your life. It does.
Mm.
I'm not just saying that like I mean that. It does. It destroys your life. It's probably one of the worst things that I've been through. And I remember the depression, the anxiety, the heart. I was getting heart palpitations as well. It was full on, and it was a vicious circle, right? Because you get anxiety, you get depression, you get heart palpitations because you're anxious. Then that makes you more anxious. It's man, it's a nightmare, and it took a
Mm.
long time to start feeling normal again. Um, Now with boost, because obviously there's a lot of supplements that are aimed at that, at boosting testosterone. And what I've noticed is a lot of them are just complete bullshit. They're
Mm.
gimmicks. They won't do much, if anything. So what would you recommend in terms of trying to boost those levels back up naturally?
Yeah, so this is something that I spent years researching myself, like, which herbs, and this is one of the reasons why I studied for 4 years naturopathy, is to actually understand like the different pathways in which we can boost testosterone as men, understanding that like cholesterol, which we consume from like eggs, steak and high fat foods, literally act as the building block to our hormones. And so, like, by optimizing diet, then complementing it with certain supplements, we can see a pretty dramatic increase in testosterone. And I've done this myself. I did blood work, before and after, playing around with certain herbs, specific traditional Chinese medicinal herbs, so like TCM based herbs. Um, One that's worked really well for myself and also a lot of guys in my community is something called Cistanch. Its nickname is Cistanch in your pants. Also known as yeah, I mean, it's known as a stalk enlarger as well. So basically, Cistanch is definitely one of those herbs that I think a lot of guys could actually benefit from, particularly, let's say, for example, they need to recover from, maybe steroid use or testosterone. They can use Cistanch alongside some other modalities to help bring levels back up.
Now, what I've heard a lot of things about Tonkat Ali. Yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Tonkat Ali is also another one that I recommend alongside Cistanch and a few others. Tonkat Ali is amazing. It's got a really strong reputation now that Dr. Andrew Huberman spoke about it, and finally gave it some praise, which it definitely does deserve some praise. That's one that is very powerful at increasing libido and sex drive in men. Um, and it can also decrease the refractory period, which is like how long it takes for a man to get a second erection after
Wow,
ejaculation. So, yeah.
wow, I didn't know that. I knew it was had many good things about it, but again, I guess when you're talking about these herbs, you really need to do your research in terms of, because some of them are probably just, this is full of rubbish, right?
Yeah.
Low quality herbs. So it's important to get it from, I guess, a source that you can trust. Maybe cause I know I've seen some of them will actually have a breakdown of its chemical analysis,
Mm,
which I think is very important if you're going to
mm.
be starting a herbal supplement. But okay, so they're the natural. Now, obviously, there's other things too, like lifting heavier weights can increase testosterone. There's many things you can do in terms of lifestyle. Now, what's your thoughts? Again, I understand you're a naturopath, but in terms of TRT,
Mm.
because I think personally, I think it's a bad rap in a lot of the time. I think that people are too quick to just say, well, listen, it's bad for you, we'll give you all these problems. And I think, well, technically, if you're just replacing, let's just say you're a 40-year-old, 50-year-old man, and you're just replenishing, or even a 30-year-old man with low levels, if you're just replenishing what you should have naturally, I don't see how that would be overly detrimental.
You're right. You're right in saying that. Like, my stance on TRT is for the guys that have absolutely exhausted everything and have done, let's say, everything right. They've focused on their nutrition. They've started icing their balls. They've done Cistanch, other herbs.
Icing their
Uh,
balls.
oh yeah, yeah. That's gone viral now. Do you see my post on TikTok?
I've seen, I don't have icing your balls. I've seen a lot of, I'll tell you what, I have seen a lot of lately, people sunning their balls, like
Yeah,
laying
there's
out the backyard with I've seen those ones. But explain to me what you mean by icing your balls. Like you mean actually icing them, like dipping them in an ice bath or something.
Yeah, so this practice, if you go on YouTube and typing icing your balls, for example, my video is now ranked to the top, and like there's literally thousands of guys that have started doing this practice, and all it involves really, Chris, is basically just getting an ice pack, applying it up against your underwear where your balls, like testicles, hang,
Yeah.
and do that for about 15 minutes, 3 times a day. And you basically, every single guy that's started doing it has noted, stronger libido, better erection quality, better energy, better vitality, feeling more aggressive in the gym. And I did blood work, before and after 12 weeks of icing. I was icing for like twice a day, for 12 weeks. And I got my levels up to 988 nanograms per deciliter naturally. So I fully
Wow.
maxed out my testosterone.
What's the average? Just so we know what we're talking about. What's the average?
So for the average, let's say 25-year-old, right now it'd be around about 550 to 600. Um, when really, as maybe 30 years ago, they were up around the thousands, like
Wow.
1,000 level. So it has dropped massively over the years.
That's huge, isn't it? When you think about that, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And of course, that's going to lead to detriment. It's not going to be good. And I think a lot of people don't. When you think of testosterone, you think of muscle, you think of aggression. A lot of people, but I don't think they, understand exactly how important it is.
Mm.
And women, obviously women as well, have testosterone in their body, obviously lower levels than men, but it still has a very important role to play.
Well, exactly right. And then if you look at, like, for example, a 40-year-old man who has low testosterone levels, I mean, at that age, I mean, if it's critically low and we then decide to administer TRT, I mean, I can't, obviously, I'm not saying that
Mm.
I administer it, but let's say they decide to go down that path. Just have a look at the quality of life difference that it's going to make. Maybe it enables the man to then better cope with stress at work. He's able to train after work because he's not completely, depleted. Maybe he has more energy to spend with his kids. These are significant lifestyle impacts that it can have. And if you talk to some guys that have decided to go down that path at that age or whatever, they'll tell you just how life changing just one hormone can be. And again, it just gets, it's in Australia, like, for men to get testosterone replacement therapy, man, they make it so difficult,
Mm.
so like, they don't want men to be vital, fit, and healthy. It's just that simple.
Yeah, and the US, it's starting to take off. A lot of
Mm.
people in the US are starting to take, and it's a great thing. I mean, low testosterone, I know, like it leads to cholesterol levels, leads to, it can lead to diabetes. I've read recently. Less bone density, things like that, muscle loss, all these things. Um, and you know what, you start thinking, well, okay, well, why don't they want us to have this whole, if it's safe, which it is under the guise of a doctor, of course it is. It's not going to kill you, put it that way. Why is it they don't want us to have it? Like they don't want us to be healthy. Then you start thinking, well, think about what it would affect. If you were to give every man at the age of 40 testosterone, right? How much money would they lose on cholesterol medication and blood pressure medication, all these other problems that we seem to have, which coincide with the decreasing testosterone levels. You start having all these other issues start flaring up at the same time. So there's obviously a huge correlation between the two of them.
Yeah. Oh, there's absolutely, yeah, major conflict of interest between those two. And I guess, like, the other part to that is, um, even like from the mental side, this is one thing that often gets neglected. Like you said, a lot of guys think that testosterone is all about building muscle, aggressiveness, but actually, there was a study that I looked at many, many years ago that looked at how testosterone can influence honesty and trust. So, like, they actually, determined that testosterone administration made men more trustworthy and they displayed more pro-social behaviors, which, I mean, that may be a
Mm,
surprise to listeners, like how testosterone can increase like loyalty and trust.
that is unusual, isn't it?
Mm.
It's would it be a confidence thing? Like, is it because low testosterone? I'm pretty sure it'll give you low in confidence, right?
Oh,
Because you
for
don't feel
sure.
good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the confidence side of things is another big one. Like in general, one thing that guys aren't aware of is how testosterone administration can increase dopamine. And dopamine, whilst you may think it's like all about addiction and reward, actually dopamine, I actually consider dopamine as the progression molecule. It's the molecule that's released that makes you want to achieve your goal, strive to be better every day. And it actually helps to build resilience in the body. So by administering testosterone or increasing it naturally, we're going to see massive changes to a man's, ability to show up in the world and just general, the way that he carries himself in society.
Yeah, very interesting. So, what do you think is causing this problem of low testosterone and dropping levels?
It's a good question. There's definitely a variety of factors that come into play here. Number one is actually the exposure to, they're called endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs. And basically, yeah, things like plastic, xenoestrogens, exposure to, deodorants, sun creams, shaving creams, things like that. They're actually rich in these chemicals that can basically block the androgen receptors, and they can actually shut down testicular function. In fact, what they do in some of these rat studies is they literally will use some of the ingredients that are found in sunscreen, for example. They'll isolate it, they'll give it to they'll apply it to a rat, give it to them topically, and what they see is a destruction in the spermatic veins and these like seminiferous tubules that basically produce and help to synthesize testosterone. They can even disrupt Leydig cells, so which are responsible for testosterone production. So really, Chris, I think there's a combination of factors, but definitely number one would be like just the crazy exposure in tap water to these endocrine disrupting chemicals.
Is fluoride one of those chemicals?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Fluoride's another one of those myths, because fluoride accumulation can actually shut down melatonin production by the pineal gland. And that by itself is going to have a secondary downstream effect, because I'm sure you know that majority of our testosterone as men is released during our sleep as a rebuilding, growth promoting hormone. Um, if we're destroying our sleep with fluoride, then that's going to have a downstream negative effect on testosterone production.
Mate, I've been going on about fluoride now for a long time. And every time I bring it up, people just straight away think I'm crazy. I'm like, it's not, like, it's a toxic chemical. It's like,
Yeah.
would you want arsenic in your tap water? No, you wouldn't, right? So there's many things fluoride does, but when you think about it, it's in our tap water, it's in our toothpaste, right? So you really can't avoid it unless you try to. Like myself, I now have, none of us drink tap water here. We
Mm.
drink, we buy our water in 10-liter bags, and we put it in glass bottles, away from plastic, no plastic bottles. Drink them out of glass bottles. And same as a toothpaste, fluoride-free toothpaste for me, my wife, and all the kids. Try and it's almost impossible to completely eliminate it. You're going to get little bits here and there, but we do make sure that it's our exposure to fluoride is very, very minimal.
Mm.
And mate, I'll tell you what, one thing I noticed in myself was the brain fog.
Oh
So
yeah.
I remember I was drinking, because I only stopped a few years ago. And I remember one of the first things I noticed, and not something I was even looking for, was that I was I could think, I was much clearer.
Yeah.
I didn't get, you know what I mean by brain fog, obviously. Um, when I was at work, it made it sometimes difficult. I couldn't get my thoughts together. And then when I stopped drinking, mainly because I used to drink nearly 3 liters of tap water a day. So that's a
Wow.
lot. That's a lot, right? But there's not a lot of water. It's probably normal. When I exercise every day, you're going to drink a lot of water, but it's a lot of chemicals in the tap water to be exposed to 3 liters of that. So I did notice um, within, I think it was maybe a week or a bit more than a week, I just seemed to be clear headed.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean that quantity of water, tap water, it's basically a chemical soup. And
Mm.
the fluoride ingestion. I mean that what we've seen again. There's some studies where they'll administer fluoride in pretty large quantities, but they're not large quantities though. Like that's the difference. Is like for example, toothpaste. Whilst they say they're only using a very small amount, like it's a small amount, but it's enough to, if you're doing it every single day, it slowly builds up in the body. And like you said, it can affect brain function. It can lower neurotransmitter production, lower acetylcholine, increase glutamate, affect the brain in ways that, will lead to brain fog. And as far as like action plan for people, do what you're doing, like you said, drinking from glass bottles, buying high quality water, or just buying a good quality water filter. The other thing that people can do, um, and this is something that I do personally, is luckily enough, I've got my own infrared sauna.
Mm.
But sauna use can actually help the body to detoxify these heavy metals, plastics, and even perhaps fluoride as well.
Very interesting.
Mm.
Infrared sauna is something I've been, yeah, you're lucky you have one at home. I would, but I would love one here. But yeah, I think it's funny, they put it in our water and they do it purely for the benefits to our teeth. Is that right? Mainly.
Well, that's what they say, is that it's supposed to help with the like mineralization of the teeth, and maybe preventing. I'm not a dentist, but preventing enamel or plaque buildup, things like that.
Because I mean, I've read a few studies now with fluoride, and I can tell you that the evidence for that is very minimal. It's not compelling at all. But there's other evidence that show that it's detrimental to cities. Like when you compare cities that have fluorinated water and who don't, there's a lot of, one of them is dementia. I know dementia. There was one study I read where it was like the places that don't have fluorinated water had much lower rates of dementia. So but
Mm.
who knows? I mean, we'll know one day. We'll find out. But by that time, the damage it would have done. That's the problem.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely, so like, fluoride's one of those, but even some of the other, like there's other heavy metals, for example, arsenic, lead poisoning, cadmium, rich in brown rice. If you're not getting good quality brown rice, like these can eventually over time build up, and it could be a contributing factor to brain fog, low energy, low testosterone, things like that.
Well, something's doing it.
Mm.
Something's causing it because we can't deny that we've got a issue with laziness. One, like if you compare it, even just the last 10 years,
Mm.
I can see it. I can notice a difference in the children now compared to when I was a child growing up. A
Mm.
huge difference. Like the amount of, there was, oh, look, there still was, but the fat kids when I was growing up were far and few between.
Mm.
Like there wasn't a great deal. Like most kids were thin and healthy and fit and running around and playing footy and kicking the ball. Now it's like I've never seen anything like it. When you actually pay attention to the lifestyle of these kids, and you're like, a child should not be fat. There's no reason for that. They should be out kicking the ball and running around and having fun. And instead, they're eating at home on the iPad, on the computer, PlayStation, eating, bed, same thing every day.
Yeah.
It's tragic,
Yeah.
really, it is.
It's terrible. And also to add to that, Chris, is even the exposure to, so like 5G frequencies, and even like these EMF, electromagnetic fields, have been shown to, in multiple studies, not only through the heat component, but also through the actual electromagnetic fields. They can actually also like significantly lower sperm count. We've seen studies where men that have their iPhone in their pocket, like just for a number of hours, like that by itself can damage sperm and damage testicular function. And you could just imagine like the younger guys nowadays, like because they're always connected, like they need to then utilize all of the biohacks and things that I talk about just to maintain a normal level, because we no longer live in a society where like it's not a safe society for like it's not conducive to optimal hormonal status. And that's why like everything that I'm posting about, the courses that I build, it's about just bridging that gap and giving men, empowering men to then fight back and become the man that they want to be, basically.
And a lot of these men would be unaware that, first of all,
Mm.
they'd be unaware that they've got low T levels. And then on top of that, they wouldn't know what's causing it. They would have no idea what's causing it. And I don't think the average GP would be able to tell them.
No, no,
I don't.
they'd have no idea. And the other thing is like, I mean, if let's say a guy, the other approach that a GP might have is literally to prescribe Viagra or like, an erectile dysfunction medication. Again, that's a band-aid solution. What if the actual culprit was low testosterone to begin with? Like, how come that was never, assessed or analyzed?
Yeah, they don't. And when I've kept an eye on my levels in the past, and it's not a test they would normally do. Like if you go to a doctor and ask for a full blood count, you want a blood test, check how things are going, they won't just check for your hormones. They won't. You'd have to ask them specifically, make sure you check for my testosterone levels and keep it on. Otherwise, I won't do it. So a lot of these men wouldn't even know what their levels are. A lot of them don't.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I literally work with a number of men like one on one. They reach out to me and ask them. The first thing I ask them is like, "Hey, man, like, when was your last blood test for your testosterone levels?" I've got 37-year-old guys that have never had their levels checked, and I'm like, "So, like, your doctor has never. You've been feeling this way for 6, 7 years, but no doctor's ever decided to check your testosterone." And he's like, "No, like I've never had that checked." I'm like, and then I try and explain like exactly what we're talking about here. Like this is like it is the quintessential hormone that men need to pay attention to, and particularly for like longevity and vitality. I mean, if you just cannot feel good as a guy with low testosterone.
No. And are you finding, what are you finding with estrogen? Obviously, estrogen is a female hormone. Are you finding that those levels are increasing in men or they're also decreasing?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of these endocrine disrupting chemicals, these plastics, they're actually xenoestrogens. And what that means is they're actually, um, these plastics can act as like a stronger form of estrogen in the human body. And they can actually, again, they can directly increase prolactin, even breast milk production in men. So we can actually
Hmm.
see an increased rates of gynecomastia and man boobs due to like these plastics and xenoestrogens. So as far as estrogen goes, though, in men, whilst we are seeing a rise in estrogen, it's all about the ratio between estrogen and testosterone. And so if a guy does have very high testosterone, i.e., myself, because I've biohacked my body
Yeah.
to get that super high, my estrogen is also high as well, but it's the ratio between testosterone to estrogen that really matters. And then if guys decide to deliberately lower estrogen, which they can do through many different drugs, anastrozole, tamoxifen, all these things,
Hmm.
you can run into like major complications by blocking estrogen too far in men. So that's something that a lot of guys need to pay attention to.
So back to the symptoms of low testosterone, what should the average man be looking out for? What are the telltale signs?
Yep. So that's a really good question. The first one would be decreased sex drive or decreased erection quality.
Now, sorry,
Um,
just to stop you there, I might actually ask you a few questions about each point, just to
yeah.
clarify a few things. So I know now, being 29, my libido is nowhere near where it was when I was 16. Right?
Mm.
That's pretty normal though. Right? As you get older, obviously it's not bad, it's good, but it's not as high, obviously, as when I was 16. When you're a teenager, you just want to fuck everything, doesn't matter. So obviously libido drops as you get older anyway. So is that something that is that because of the testosterone, the problem that we're talking about, or is that just a part of aging in that sense?
Well, there's many culprits there. I mean, like testosterone definitely plays a role, but it's also some of the other downstream metabolites of testosterone, and also what happens in the brain. Because a lot of guys don't realize this, but the sexual libido, like that horny feeling that guys get, a lot of that is actually mediated by neurotransmitters in the brain, specifically dopamine. And so, and even these dopamine receptors, which, you know, long-term consumption of, like, let's say certain drugs, like I mentioned before, SSRIs, serotonin, these can decrease like brain libido. And so, there are many potential factors that play a role in that. But I would say, like, a decreased sex drive in men, it is normal for a guy to see a drop off over time, once they hit 35, particularly after they have children. Like, there's that's well researched that after having kids, the man's sex drive drops off, and that makes sense from an evolutionary point of
Yeah.
view. But in saying that, I think if a guy struggles to get an erection in a romantic relationship with someone that they feel comfortable with,
There's a
then
problem.
there's a problem, man. There's a problem. Mm.
Yeah, because it is hard. I mean, because a lot of people just pass off a lot of these issues with aging, right? They go, "Oh, you're getting older, and that's normal." And I think that's a problem that we've got ourselves in this. We're stuck in this mentality that you know it's normal. It's normal. It's normal to feel this way. I'm always tired because I work so much. That's normal because I work. I've got kids. I'm tired, but I can promise you now, I've got 5 kids.
Wow.
I've got 5 kids and I work nonstop. Like I'm always working 14 hours a day, every day. Don't stop. And I can promise you that yes, you have times where you're tired and you can't be bothered. That's normal, but it's not every day. I
Mm.
can go weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks without a break. Right. So I think it's important to note that while it does happen, you do get burnout. That's what's called burnout, right? Um, but also look at your lifestyle as well and consider the fact that maybe it's due to your lifestyle, not just stress and work and the rest of those things.
Yeah, exactly. And also what you mentioned there, Chris, like in regards to something that really frustrates me when I see blood test results is, for example, I'll ask a guy like, "Oh, hey, can you show me your lab test results?" And he'll say, "Oh, you don't need to. My doctor said my results were normal." And then I'm like, "Okay, normal. Do you realize that you could be normal at a testosterone level at 210?
Hmm.
You're on the very bottom, and you're a 25-year-old guy. Your levels are 210. The doctor will come back and say, "No, you're fine. You don't need to look into testosterone." Or, but that's something that frustrates me a lot, because there's a difference between feeling like being like normal versus feeling optimal. And I think every guy should have the right to feel his best. And the only way that he can feel his best is to have optimized levels of testosterone.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've noticed as well. And I don't know how do they change that with age? So if a 60-year-old man walks in and gets a testosterone check, do they use the same perimeters to measure what they consider normal as they would on a 30-year-old?
Yeah, and even to add to that as well, they've actually decreased the total reference range. They've actually dropped it down because there's been such a global decline in the average that now the max level, depends which lab you use, but Now the maximum level, like my blood test result was 34.3. And for me, that on the blood test, it said it was high. They flagged it as high. It's not high. That's where it should be. Like that, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I remember when I was talking before, when I was on testosterone, I remember going to get a blood test, right? Because at the time it was like, that's how everyone that I was around said, oh, if you want to know how good the stuff is, you get a blood test to check your levels, right? So I remember doing that. I remember going into the GP, get a blood test, coming back, and he's like, sit down. I hadn't prepared him for it, right? So I didn't tell him. And I remember sitting there, and I'm not sure exactly what measurement they used, but I think it wasn't the one like where you said you're 900 and something. It wasn't that measurement.
No.
It was like the average, because my one was over 250,
Oh, okay.
had like an over symbol. So obviously it got that high, they couldn't even measure it. And it said over 250. It was flagged. It's like, what? I think, I don't know if the average was then when I got it done, but it was like abnormally high. And I remember him
Yeah.
freaking out. It was, yeah, it's crazy. But to think they wouldn't do that if it was the opposite, to think that if it's at lower end of normal, they would just go, oh, it's okay. Knowing very well that you're probably going to be feeling that, the effects of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same also applies with other blood, like with other markers on a blood test. I'm really hoping to eventually come out with like a decode your blood test, like a basic dummies guide, like for just the average person to like, at least like when they get their results, they can, have a look at and compare where they should be. I feel like that'll be a, really useful resource for people.
Definitely. 'Cause I don't think a lot of people know how to interpret blood test results. They just
Mm.
give it to the doctor. And sometimes the doctor doesn't even give it to you. It's on the
Oh,
computer. They just tell you, yeah, you're right. No worries. See you later. It's important to ask for a printout and get it assessed by somebody like yourself who can look at it and can sit down and break it down with you, rather than them just going, yeah, no worries, fine. It's like, well, it's not really fine. I remember I had, I've had a blood test now, and it's been a while, actually, probably 2 years. So I should probably go for one soon. But um, I remember mine was perfect. Like in terms of that, everything was fine. I ask them they tell me, then ask for a printout.
yeah.
And if I'm ever unhappy with something, I'll always mag it or highlight it across it, and then I'll check on that later. We'll get another one done. But the last one I done was brilliant. It was really
Mm.
good. But I took the time to really know. Like every time I look at a blood test, I'll look at, obviously there's 101 things on there. I'll
Yeah.
Google. If I don't know, I'll Google it, so I know exactly what it is that I'm looking at.
Mm.
But it's an important tool that everyone should utilize. How often do you reckon we get a blood test? 12 months, 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the individual. Like, let's say a guy, like I work a lot with athletes. Athletes, I think, should do it every 6 months,
Okay.
because they're always changing diets and maybe their training programs. They're switching up their training style, things like that. But for the everyday person, if they're just looking to check up on their well-being, once a year can be enough if it's comprehensive. Um, but like you said, for me, I look at a blood test. It's just a tool. Like it gives us a snapshot into their health. But really, like again, it should come back to how a person feels.
Yeah.
Like I really do believe that if you're a guy that's waking up in the morning, you have energy to get out of bed, you feel motivated to get shit done, you're able to make love whenever you want, you feel productive, good mindset, very positive minded. I mean, that's gonna. I wouldn't even like if and then let's say his levels came back at like let's say 550. Um, I wouldn't be too concerned. I mean, because like he's already feeling good. Maybe he doesn't need too much. His body doesn't need as much.
Mm.
Um, we want to treat the person, not the blood work. Is the principle.
Yeah. But my principle I have, um, uh, in every part of my life, is I always listen to my body, always. Like I've never been one to say, okay, I'm going to work out for 3 days and have a rest day, then work 4 more days, have another rest day. I'll have a rest day. I know when I need one.
Yeah.
Sometimes I need one before that. Sometimes I need 2 in a row. If I wake up, oh, still not 100%. As I'm getting older now, I'm starting to feel things I didn't feel 10 years ago. It's like just
Mm.
shoulders and my knee, but getting older. So I train differently. I don't lift heavy like I did years ago. No, I do, but not as heavy as often. That's all I used to do was weights, heavy weights.
Mm.
Now I do a lot of kettlebells and different things because I'm getting older. My body's changing. I need to change with it. And I really do listen to my body. If I get up in the morning, like obviously this is what I do now. So after I lost my job back in August for not getting the vaccine, I'll do this podcast and what I do full time. That's what I do. So when I don't really have to be anywhere at a certain time, right? Like I used to, it's up at 5:30, get to work at 7, that's finished. So if I wake up I try and get up early still regardless. But if I get up and I think I'm still tired, I'll go back to sleep because I know I need it. Whereas if I wake up and I'm fine, I'll get straight up. I won't snooze the alarm because I'm good. But I think I do my best to listen to that, like no matter what it is, working out, even my diet. Like I've made changes to my diet based on how I feel. I don't eat
Yeah.
chili. I used to have chili on everything. Now I don't have it as much because I know for some reason it bloats my stomach.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't have chili. So I do listen to my body a lot. I'm very in sync. I think I'd like to think I'm very in sync with my body and what's going on with it.
Yeah. This is a really crucial step, I guess, with all the things that I've mentioned, like icing your balls, like different biohacks, things
I'm
like
gonna give
that.
that a go.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely start doing it, man. Like it's a game changer.
You'd have no balls when you finish, though, would you not? They'd be gone. They're crawled up in a hiding spot.
They come back bigger and stronger. Don't worry.
I'll give it a go. I'll do it away from my wife. I'd hate for her to walk in. I'm sitting there just sitting there, icing the balls, but it can't be as bad as some of the post. I'm serious. The posts of the blokes outside. Oh, I love it. Cracks me out. You see them out there on the lawn. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
With their legs up, which is because they try to tan the testicles. Well,
Your wife might be wondering, honey, where are the frozen peas?
where are the frozen peas? That's right. Oh, mate, I couldn't wear. I just had them on balls. Right, they're still good. They're still good.
Yeah.
But that's
No.
interesting. No, I'll look into that definitely some more. And I'll
Yeah, I mean that's like, I mean, if guys like want to learn more about it, like I've got like on my Instagram now, there's like literally like a free testosterone training, and it goes through like all the things I'm talking about now. Just jump into that webinar and dive deep into like all these things. I go into more detail about like how to do it, how it actually works, the science. I mean, everything that I'm posting about, and hopefully you notice this, Chris, is like it's all evidence based. It's all referenced. Everything that I do, I pride myself on, being evidence based.
have to. If you don't, you get caught out very quickly.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that, and that's something you do as well. And it's good to know that, like this is what anyone listening, this is what I do, is I'll find a few people like yourself being one, right? So everything you share, as you said, is evidence based. So it saves me. If you post something, I don't have to worry about looking into it more. I don't need to find research I know that what you're sharing is reliable. And that's what I've tried doing with my audience and my followers. Is the same thing, is to make everything I share is factual and based on data and evidence, not just because I thought of it. Because you need to, and it's very important to have a few sources of information like that you can trust 100%.
Well, I've been caught out by my best friends like numerous times that say that I literally have no life. They're like, dude, you need to stop like in my spare time, Chris, like even when I'm on the toilet, like I'm going through my it's called PubMed. Like I go through the PubMed articles. I got certain notifications turned on. And that's what I do in my spare time. Like I'm literally in my spare time researching, understanding different hormones, understanding different pathways, so that like I can be at the forefront of everything. I don't want to I don't rely on anyone else to feed me the information. Like I want to be the guy that brings it to the table, bringing it to people like yourself who like has maybe like never heard of these things before. Like that's really what I, pride myself on.
Yeah. And mate, that's you can regurgitate other people's work every day. Right. But again, it's not what you do. You got a very unique perspective on things, like icing your balls. Like I'd never heard of that. Just you told me. I never. If someone says what's something you wouldn't do, I'd probably say ice my balls, because it just seems uncomfortable, right? But So you've taught me something. That's because you decided you looked into it more and you got your own thing going on. And that's very important to have that. And we all know about the benefits of cold showers and ice baths. We know that. Um, but yeah, PubMed's a good site. I don't have notifications set up and whatnot, but I get redirected there many times
Yeah.
to their articles, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're well informed, and mate, it's I'm not a doctor by any means, but it consumes you in a good way, where you think there's more to this. I want to look into this more, and I want to learn. And I've learned more in the past 5 years than I've learned ever at school, ever. And it's all self-taught. I become obsessed with certain things. So I watched a documentary last night, right, about the sugar.
Yeah.
So for the next few months, I know me. I know what I'll be doing. I'll be searching up things related to that because I want to dig deeper into that because I feel like there's something really sinister going on with that. So
Yeah.
I'll look into that. But mate, it's a good thing you're doing, and it's very important. And I like that you understand the importance of testosterone in our bodies. And I know we talk about men a lot, but I'm sure it's also important for women.
Well, that's the other thing as well, Chris, is that like low levels of testosterone in women can dramatically affect their sex drive as well, and even perhaps their energy levels and motivation. So again, like whilst I don't specialize in the women's hormonal health, it does play a crucial role in their general well-being as well.
Now, what would you say? So you did mention that sex drive was the biggest sign that something's not right.
Yep.
We'll continue on that. We got off topic a little bit, but what would you say the next few important things to look out for?
I would actually say the next one would be an inability to build muscle, and or like just poor body composition. So like increased fat mass and decreased muscle mass. Um, this is because testosterone can dramatically affect something known as protein synthesis. And basically, when we have insufficient levels of testosterone as a guy, I mean, that hormone is crucial post workout to help with, muscle growth, improving recovery, things like that. So I think for guys that have low testosterone levels, they're going to have like decreased athletic performance and or compromised body composition as well.
So would you say, because there's a lot of men out there with man boobs, there's a lot. Would you say man boobs is necessarily a sign of low testosterone?
Well, the other argument to that would be, what about the bodybuilders that develop gynecomastia? Because like they will be taking testosterone, but then it's going way too high, and then estrogen is also getting too high as well. So they develop a man boob. So like, yeah, technically, like, yes, low testosterone levels can contribute to man boobs if their estrogen is like that. Like I said before, the ratio between testosterone and estrogen.
Interesting. Now, what would you say in regards to? Because a lot of people think, I don't know if it might be right. I don't know, but a lot of people assume it's like those old wives' tales, right? Where people just you hear something and you're like, that doesn't sound scientific, but everyone says it, right? People will say the same thing. Men that can't grow a beard
Okay.
have low testosterone. I'm growing with this. And I do, one thing I do know is that hair loss, male pattern baldness can be associated with high testosterone levels.
Yeah, so this is where it gets a bit like controversial at the moment. There's like a range of medications known as DHT blockers. And to explain to your listeners, DHT is dihydrotestosterone. Now, DHT is a stronger metabolite. It's like testosterone's older brother. It's like the stronger older brother of testosterone, and most guys produce it. Now, that's what they believe is like the key driver behind hair loss in men. However, it's not the only factor. There are many other factors that contribute to hair loss, such as high prolactin, high cortisol, high adrenaline, like stress, nutrient deficiencies. Like it's not just DHT. So, and the other thing I really want to warn guys is the medications that they use to decrease DHT, such as finasteride and dutasteride, these medications are potentially. I mean, I've met a number of guys that have almost had their lives like destroyed by these drugs, because they have.
Why would someone want to block DHT for hair
Well,
loss?
yeah, to actually like slow down like hair loss by decreasing DHT. They believe DHT's a component of male pattern baldness, um, and there is some evidence to suggest that it can, you know, worsen male pattern hair loss. But the medications that are used to block DHT, I mean, some of these medications are really devastating. Like they can lead to neurological issues, depression, completely destroys a man's sex drive. Because DHT, by the way, is like, it's like the chief hormone that makes a man feel like an alpha male. Like it makes a guy feel really confident. You know how you said at the start, like testosterone influence confidence. Well, it's actually a lot of that's actually coming from the DHT. The guys that have very high levels of DHT, like they are true alpha males. Like they feel calm, they feel really confident, and they just generally feel really good about themselves.
So what can men do to increase those levels in terms of if they, because obviously it's beneficial. Obviously you did suggest that maybe it's linked to hair loss.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a, you know, you got to give a little to, but I mean, look, if you're already starting to go bald already, well, raise them as high. So is it the same things that raise testosterone? Is that just like a byproduct of testosterone? You said a metabolite, yeah? So it's a metabolite in terms of
Yeah, you're
the,
spot on. Like if anything, like anything that boosts testosterone is subsequently going to have a downstream effect on increasing DHT. But actually, like there are over-the-counter supplements that can actually be used to increase DHT. And one of those is one that you would be very much aware of is creatine monohydrate. Creatine has been shown to raise levels of DHT. And so does vitamin B1, so very high dose vitamin B1. Another amino acid called glycine. Glycine is used for sleep. It's an anti-aging amino acid. Like that can increase DHT. And even certain foods, like for example, have you heard of it's a grain called sorghum?
no.
Sorghum, it's a sorghum. I mean, it's similar to rice sort of thing, but that's like a really potent DHT booster. And then also like low dose zinc can actually stimulate DHT. But yeah, there's a lot of things that guys can do if they want to boost that DHT hormone. They're gonna start to feel a lot of there are a lot of steroids that are based on that DHT like molecule. There's a lot of they're called DHT derivatives. And you ask any guy that goes on like these DHT derivative steroids, like the first thing that they notice, their mood, they just feel really good.
That's interesting. It's a very complex issue because again, there's a lot more to it than just testosterone. And then you've got, as you said as well, estrogen's another factor. And what's big? I hear it all the time. I like it. I use it. It's a good term. Soy boy. Great. I love it. What role does soy play?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up, Chris. Like a soy boy, the way I look at it here is like soy can do a few things. You'll see studies suggesting that soy has no effect on testosterone levels. However, what I want to just like explain to men is that soy is a powerful way to lower DHT. And I want to make this link here between DHT and penis size. Now, this is going to be quite a shock to a number of guys.
Got my attention.
And this is I'm just reading off the data. So basically what they did was they assessed the average level of DHT amongst African men versus Asian men. And what they found was that African men had much higher
Oh,
levels of DHT, and these Asian population had lower levels of DHT. If you look at
interesting.
penile size, DHT application for some, like particularly during puberty, DHT is heavily responsible for penis development and size. So by blocking DHT, it could influence like the size of a man's penis.
Wow. Good to know when I was 12. I wonder what that is. Like, obviously there must be something in Africa and African diet, maybe in their lifestyle compared to, because only yesterday I seen a thing pop up where they said that, I think it was they compared the average penis size from all the continental countries, and I think it was something like the African countries always ranked up there somewhere. A lot of the Asian countries are at the bottom. I think Cambodia was like the lowest. And I thought, well, something's got to be causing that. Like, it has to be a reason. So I wonder what that is. I wonder if it's just the diet or maybe the exposure to sunlight. Who knows?
Well, you know how I mentioned just before, I mentioned that grain called sorghum,
Yeah.
which that is rich in the African diet. Like, it's native to Africa, and that's their predominant grain. I'm not saying that that's like the reason why they have higher,
Big packets.
but it actually does increase DHT. And so even there's like a small population of it's like the penile enlargement community. There's a website called Thunder's Place, where like guys talk about different practices and things that they can do to increase penile size. And some of them topically, they'll apply DHT cream to their actual penis, and they see increases in girth and size as well.
Wow. That's so interesting. I think I think we worry about it too much as men. To have a website about it, I think as long as you're average, as long as it's not ridiculously small, it's not gonna make much of a difference to your life.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it's interesting though, because obviously there's a reason why men have different penis sizes. There's a reason. That's very interesting. It could be linked to that. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, obviously, a lot of it is going to be genetic. I mean, genetic component huge. No pun intended.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's very interesting.
yeah.
I'm gonna just run something by you so I can find it now. Trying to find it now. All right, now. What time do you have to jump off here, just so I know?
Yeah, fairly soon. Fairly soon.
Well, I'll speak to you about nootropics. That's what I want to speak to you about, because a lot of talks. I know quite a few people personally who are writers. They make video producers, another one, and they use a drug called modafinil. Swear by it. They swear by it. And from what I've read about it, it seems to do what they say it does. Obviously, that's not a natural nootropic as such. It's a pharmaceutical drug. But what are you finding at the moment in terms of nootropics in that space? Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that you can try. Obviously, this one here that I've got, the Shine drink, which is good. There's many others like it. So what would you say at the moment in terms of optimizing brain activity, just your cognitive ability? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so modafinil, like, just to preface this, so like modafinil is an anti-narcoleptic drug. So it stops people from just falling asleep. So basically, the drug is designed to keep you awake. So it's a psychostimulant. It's known as a eugeroic. Modafinil works by increasing dopamine, histamine, acetylcholine, neurotransmitters that make you feel awake, alert, and aroused. Now, modafinil absolutely will do that. It will keep people awake. It will keep them feeling more alert and more focused. However, the biggest drawback with modafinil is the fact that it's not sustainable. And the reason I say this is because if you're dosing modafinil every single day, eventually what's going to happen is that you're eventually going to be depleting your neurotransmitters. And over time, what can happen is you actually start to develop a dependency on the drug. And people will note this if they take, let's say, modafinil for 3 days in a row. Man, what happens if you don't take it on day 4? You're literally in a withdrawal from a drug, just like people go into withdrawal when they go out and party and take, party drugs. The same effect happens the next day. They're going to feel like absolute dog shit the next day. And it's going to just completely destroy their baseline performance. Whereas I like to use other compounds that are sustainable, that you can use over time, that don't have this, depleting effect on the brain.
So you said that modafinil is a stimulant. Now, how is that different? Because my understanding is it's very different to amphetamines like Ritalin and all these other drugs that they use for ADHD is the big one. But obviously they're a little bit different, aren't they?
Yeah. So they do share. You're right in saying that they do share similar mechanisms of action. They do, raise certain neurotransmitters. It's just the way that they do it. Modafinil's main mechanism of action, they believe, is a DAT inhibitor, dopamine transporter inhibitor. And that basically keeps dopamine more active in the synaptic cleft. Whereas Ritalin and Adderall, man, and these amphetamines and Dexies and things like that, they release dopamine in a very powerful way that will lead to dopamine receptor downregulation. And then what actually happens is, again, following withdrawal from these medications, the brain is in a severe dopamine deficit, and now their baseline is negative 30 to 40%. So this is the major difference.
Man, a lot of kids are on Ritalin and these other medications. And I've always suspected, because I remember when I was 14, 15, I was a shit at school, like proper, right? And that's what the doctor gave. I remember I had it. I don't know how long I was on them for, but my mum would give me one before I went to school. I have to go to the office, have another one at lunchtime. And I remember how I felt at the time. I didn't really, I was 15, I didn't care. But when I look back now, I was like a space cadet. Like, honestly, I was high all the time. Like, I was hyper all the time from those drugs. And now I'm starting to think, well, I can't imagine there's no consequences of that, especially giving it to a child whose brain's still developing, and you're sitting there and giving them, you may as well be giving them meth, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is it is a big issue because like you said, there's definitely going to be some downstream long-term consequences. And this is like, I work with a lot of guys that, have been on these medications. Then they want help to put together like a cocktail of nootropics to then rebalance the brain. And unfortunately, there are many things that we can do to restore dopamine sensitivity. I've never used or abused like Ritalin or Adderall or modafinil, but I've basically upgraded my like dopamine receptors using all of these nootropics so that I can have really high baseline dopamine levels.
So obviously nootropics, a lot of people wouldn't even know what they are. Or maybe they've heard of them, but don't know exactly what they are. So the drink that I've got, one of the ones that I've seen a lot is because I've got it right here, and I pronounce it L-theanine.
Yeah, L-theanine.
That's the one. I've actually got capsules of those in the cupboard.
Yeah.
And I take them with coffee.
Yeah.
Because it gets rid of that jittery feeling, because I get very jittery from caffeine.
Mm.
So I find what that does, it actually helps balance that out. So I get the alertness of having a coffee, but I don't get the jittery, shitty feeling afterwards. So what would you say about that as a nootropic? Because I know it is looked at as a nootropic, is it not?
Oh, for sure. I'd say like L-theanine is perhaps one of the most researched and safest nootropics to begin with. In fact, I consider the caffeine and theanine combination as the beginner nootropic stack, because as you said, it can increase. Basically, what L-theanine does is it mimics how you feel after meditating. So it just basically puts you into a state of increases alpha waves in the brain, and it makes you just feel calm and focused. And it's a really great ingredient.
Interesting. And there's obviously not a great deal of side effects or risks associated with it.
I've got a video probably going to be released next week on my megadosing L-theanine experiment, where I went up to 1,000 milligrams, which is 10 times the recommended dose.
Gotta say, it's a lot.
And yeah, you'll see some of the outcomes of that experiment.
Keen for that. I'll definitely tune in and watch that one. So, what would you say are the best ones, or ones at least to look into? If you, because I mean, I'm telling you, if when people start realizing the potential and how much they can, I guess, almost unlock their brain, right?
Oh yeah,
It's you'll never look back. So, what do you recommend as a good? Obviously, you've just given your starter point, but in terms of going a little bit further than that.
yeah. I mean, this is my main goal with this whole space, was to develop some resources for people. If people wanted to, they could just like. I wrote a book, like a beginner's guide to nootropics. It's called Boost Your Brain. You can check that on my website. But otherwise, like other ingredients that I really like. One of them's L-tyrosine. That's a really great ingredient. Taurine is another ingredient that's quite safe and versatile. And then also another one called teacrine, not theanine, teacrine. That one there is like a caffeine alternative that has no crash. It doesn't affect blood pressure, and it doesn't cause anxiety as well.
Interesting, because that's a lot of things. That's a lot of the issue people have with these nootropics and other just stimulants in general, is that it causes anxiety, raises blood pressure, increases heart rate, all these other, I guess, downsides of it. So I guess a more cleaner energy in terms of, no crash, no anxiety, no increased heart rate, blood pressure will be optimal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think like the best way that I think we should explain to your audience, like nootropics basically unlock your brain's potential, but they do it in a way that's sustainable. Like it's all about long-term neuroprotection. So they protect the brain against damage. They heal the brain from previous damage, and they improve cognition in the long run. So they actually have like compounding benefits over time. Like the more you use them, the better your brain performs. And then they can also be used to target specific areas of cognition. For example, some nootropics are specifically designed to improve memory, like specifically for memory, like short-term working memory. Other nootropics are designed to reduce anxiety. Other nootropics are designed to improve focus. Like there are so many different nootropics out there, and it can be overwhelming for people when they get into the space. But yeah, I've built so many good resources for people to dive into. So yeah, make sure that they check it out.
I'll put the links in the description of this anyway, so people can jump on your site and have a look. And what did you say your book was called? Boost Your Brain?
Yeah, Boost Your Brain. I wrote that when I was in Byron Bay, actually.
What, it was a holiday, or you're living there?
And I'm like, I just feel like writing a book, so I wrote a book.
Wrote a book while you're on holiday.
Yeah,
supposed to switch off on a holiday.
My brain doesn't switch off.
You did say that. You did say that. All right, listen, we'll leave it there because I know you got to go. But mate, listen, you're welcome back anytime. And in fact, I'd like to have you on again to cover a little bit more, because I feel like we barely scratched the surface. But mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. So I'll put your links in the description of this. Mate, it's been great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. I knew it was going to be a fun chat.